Good afternoon. My name is Sgt I'm the librarian for the College of Media and Communication. On behalf of Texas Tech University Libraries, I would like to welcome you to our event this afternoon in celebration of Black History Month. I want to thank the university libraries and libraries public programming and outreach teams and friends of the libraries who have made today possible. Today I have the pleasure of introducing you to Henry B. Crawford, retired curator of history at the Museum of Texas Tech University, who will be presenting Buffalo Soldiers, Men, Mission, and Material Culture. Mr. Crawford holds a Master of Arts in American History and Museum Studies, training certificates from the Smithsonian Institution and Texas Historical Commission, and is the founder and CEO of his Living History Interpretation and Consulting entity, History by Choice. He is active in living history and shares his expertise through lectures and consulting on living history philosophy, practices, techniques, and research at historic sites nationwide. Currently, he is enjoying retirement as the model railroad exhibit operator and train master at the Science Spectrum Museum in Lubbock, Texas. His presentation today will introduce Buffalo Soldiers and their place within history of the American Frontier Army during the Indian Campaigns era, 3 decades following the Civil War. Please help me welcome Mr. Henry B. Crawford.
Am I turned on? I'm on. Good. Great. How about some snow today? No thanks. Okay, good. I love this sound. This is pretty awesome. I'm going to make sure nothing rubs against this. Let's do this. Costume change. That way I don't have a hat lanyard rubbing up against my mic. Okay. Well, thanks for having me, y'all. I appreciate everything. And thanks to the library and Friends of the Library for having me out here. I was supposed to do this 2 weeks ago, but that's okay. It gave me 2 more weeks to prepare. What we're going to talk about is the kind of thing that I like with, as most of y'all know, history, museums, material culture, stuff. My students always like to say I'm a curator of stuff, and we all love stuff. I'm losing the sound. Am I doing okay? Can y'all hear me all right? Is it jumping in and out? Or loud and clear. All right, 5 by 5. Good. Okay. Well, that's me. Doing this for 40 years. Working in museums for 40 years. This is my 40th anniversary working in museums, by the way, and my 40th anniversary doing living history. I serve on a lot of museum boards and councils, and I'm always being drafted into doing something, consulting and lecturing. I'm a nice guy. Says so right there, so it must be true. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about Buffalo Soldiers. I put this guy up on the screen because he's not a Buffalo Soldier. He gets misidentified. Sergeant Baldwin gets misidentified as a Buffalo Soldier, but he's really not. This is a photograph of Sergeant Baldwin, First Sergeant Baldwin, of the 56 U.S. Colored Troops Civil War. This photograph lives at the Chicago Historical Society Museum. I've had it in my hot little hand because I know people there. It's all about who you know. But the thing is, people often cite this photograph as a photograph of a quintessential Buffalo Soldier. He is not. Every time I see it, I would start to look at, okay, where are they getting that information? Where's that photograph coming from? And the answer is, it comes out of our own Institute of Texas and Cultures in San Antonio. So one time I talked to the photographic curator there. You have a photograph that's misidentified, and I told him all about it, and I told him where it came from and everything, and I showed my picture. We're losing sound. Yeah. My picture. I don't think it's me. Yeah, we can do that. Somebody's got their ham radio on. Turn off your cell phones. Okay. But anyway, what I did was I told him that... Keep that. Keep the mic. Okay. I'm not shy, folks, so go right. Your guess is as good as mine. Whoa, great. We have no idea. I don't know. It could just be that somebody saw the photograph and said, Buffalo Soldier. You know how that works. But it's just somebody's assumption based on nothing more than somebody's assumption. But besides the fact that I've seen the original, but the original also has a notation on the bottom, it's kind of cropped out here, that says what his unit is. And it says here, Company G, 56, U.S. Colored Infantry, something in there. But there was also noted on the thing. So, and the Chicago Historical Society Museum has good documentation on it, which is written right here. They know where he was, who he was, they have his service record. So we know exactly who this guy was. Institute of Texan Cultures didn't know that. Hopefully until I told them. But anyway, let's move on ahead here. Texas, primarily. We're going to look a little bit about where these guys were serving. And one theme that's going to come through time and time again throughout this talk is the similarity between what the black soldiers were doing and what the white soldiers were doing. Virtually identical. Same job, same places, same equipment, same horses, same everything. They were all doing exactly the same work. Yes, $13 a month for privates, $15 a month for corporals, and on and on and on up. Same pay, same food, same everything. Same enemy, same sky, you know. No different. Okay, about 1870 or so, we have the what's called the line of settlement here. This is just for reference down here. This is San Antonio, so you get an idea of where things are. But the line of settlement in Texas kind of sort of scoots up from the coast up in that direction. So about 1870 or so, you're having a line of settlement right here, hence the forts. The forts form the defensive line of settlement, right? Now, over here we have some other forts that are really important. Again, San Antonio, we have a very important road called the San Antonio-El Paso Road, also called the Jackass Trail. Stagecoach line, freight line, Army supply route, very, very important. So you had to have forts that are scattered along here. Fort Inge, Fort Clark, all of these forts up here, Fort Lancaster's up here, that's Fort Davis, and all along, all the way to El Paso where you had Fort Bliss. And then on beyond El Paso, into New Mexico territory, where you have Fort Selden, Fort Verde, then you had Fort Bowie in Arizona territory, all the way over to San Diego. That was the San Antonio-El Paso Road that continued on to San Diego, also called the California Road. So it's the job of the Army to protect these routes. And in the process of that, protecting the guarding the frontier, guarding water holes, river crossings, all the logistical things that they have to do. All right, so this was the Army right after the Civil War. Now let me talk a little bit about what's going on. After the war, after every major conflict throughout history in the United States, the Army downsizes. The Army had about 4 million, at least something like 4 million soldiers in the Federal Army during the Civil War. It downsizes to about 30,000. Just out of curiosity, because I don't know, how many, what's the capacity of Jones Stadium? Anybody? How much? Okay, with the United States Army, after the Civil War, you would only be able to fill half of Jones Stadium. Now, what does the Army have to do? What's their job? Besides protecting the frontier, what else is going on? Reconstruction. They have to garrison the South. They have to protect Washington, D.C. They have the West Coast that they have to deal with. Of course, the Mexican frontier, because we're still having problems with Mexico. The Canadian border they have to deal with. Plus, everything else in between. All of the not just Texas, but the entire plains frontier has to be protected and garrisoned. About 30,000 troops are doing that. So, in the Civil War, you might have a regiment that consists of about 1,000 men. During the Indian War period, a good-sized regiment might have maybe 300 or 400 if you're lucky. So, we're talking about seriously downsizing here. Okay? So, along with that, Congress decides to pull money away from the Army. We're not fighting a major war anymore. They don't need all this money. So let's downsize the allotment of funds to the Army. That poses a problem for the Army. That's a buffalo. That poses a problem for the Army that I'll get into in a little bit later. I have some great illustrations of that. Now, where does the name buffalo soldier come from? That animal right there. All right? Because his hair looks like what my hair used to look like. Shaggy, woolly, and they have this ferocity to them. Now, Indians gave them that name. We're not sure if it was the Comanche or Kiowa in Texas, or some people say that it was the Cheyennes in Kansas that gave it to them. Either way works fine for me. I don't care. But about 1867, 68, when the Army starts to deploy these men out into the frontier, this is when they start encountering Indians, or the Indians start seeing them and noticing them, and they're saying, these guys are different. They look like buffalo. So let's call them buffalo soldiers. That name doesn't really appear in print until about 1874. But it kind of becomes a name for them. They don't really call themselves that until much, much later. So they still call themselves soldiers, because they're professional soldiers, and that's how they view themselves, as professional soldiers. Now, some people say it was because of these things right here, buffalo coats. But the Army didn't start issuing those until the very, very late 1880s. So you're not going to see all the soldiers wearing buffalo coats in the wintertime in the 1860s. It's not going to happen. So this whole idea they're wearing buffalo coats, that's why they're called buffalo soldiers, forget about that. Erase that from your mind, because that's not true. But anyway, let's look ahead a little bit. I'm going to show you some images of real, honest-to-goodness, true buffalo soldiers of the early Indian Wars period. And I'll give you an idea of what I'm talking about with regards to uniforms. He's basically wearing a uniform of a Civil War soldier. Again, the Army did not get new uniforms until the 1870s. So what are they wearing? They're wearing surplus uniforms. So people say, the black soldiers got surplus uniforms, they got old uniforms from the Civil War. That's true, but everybody else did too. There's another one. He's wearing a sack coat, this guy before, he's wearing what's called a shell jacket, or actually called a roundabout jacket. It's a short jacket. And he's got his Civil War period forage cap on with his insignia. It says 10th Cavalry Company C, Company D. And it's also backward. You know, a lot of photography, the images are tended to be reversed. This is a tintype, which means it's a positive image, but it's reverse, which is why the lettering is backwards. If you can look real close, you see the buttons are on the wrong side and that kind of thing. So anyway, and he's also a cavalry soldier. You notice that the stripe on his pants is dark. Stripes on his pants are dark. That's because the way light refracts off of certain colors, it registers a certain value. Back then, the film wasn't sensitive enough to pick up those certain values, so the reflecting light off of the yellow stripes comes out dark. That's why he looks like he's wearing dark stripes, but he's really not. Okay, next. Back to this guy. Same thing, Civil War uniform. He's wearing what's called a sac coat. It's a 4-button sac coat, very typical for soldiers during the Civil War. And again, he's wearing what's called a kepi, this guy right here. A little different than a forage cap, but very, very similar. But again, he's a soldier of the earlier period. Some of these photographs come from, if you ever get up to Albany to the Old Jail Art Center, they have an outstanding library and a really, really fine photographic archive. The nail collection, if you ever want to rummage through the nail collection, you're in for a treat because it's awesome. Got a plug for them. Okay, again, these guys are at parade rest. These guys are cavalry soldiers. I should have put this picture later on because they're not carrying, they're carrying 1870s weapons. But again, it's just a photograph that shows you uniforms, what the uniforms are looking like. Okay. Now, again, here's a photograph of the of soldiers, infantry soldiers on a stagecoach. Remember I talked about the San Antonio-El Paso road? One of the jobs of the Army was to guard that road. And how they do that? They garrison forts down there, but they also are riding the stagecoaches because in many cases, stagecoaches are going to be carrying federal property. What are they going to be carrying? Currency, mail, gold, things like that. So if you see the movie that says, throw down the strong box, and the guy lifts up the strong box and throws it off, nah, not going to happen. First of all, if you've ever lifted a Stagecoach strong box, you ain't going to pull it up and fling it off. You basically have a safe right there. And chances are pretty good, more often than not, those crooks are going to encounter armed soldiers with that Stagecoach. Now, sometimes they didn't. They couldn't guard every Stagecoach. They'd only guard the ones that had federal property on them. So that's their job. But anyway, and chances are they're not going to be standing up here while the Stagecoach is running. Obviously, these guys are posing for the photograph, but you see that there's a place for the soldiers to sit here. And also, in very important shipments, you would also have mounted soldiers with the Stagecoach, whether mounted infantry or cavalry, guarding the Stagecoach. So that's one of the major jobs that the Army was doing. Okay, here's a guy. This again is a later photograph, but I wanted to show this. Buffalo soldiers, just like all other soldiers, when they get their pictures taken, they want to show off. He's wearing his pistol on the wrong side, but on that side you can't see the pistol on the other side. So he's going to show it, and he's got it pulled out of the holster and turned around so he can show this off. This is a picture he's going to send off to a sweetheart. Look at me, I'm macho, you know. So, but that's very typical of a soldier's photograph. All right, we're familiar with the story of the Bicycle Corps, right? 1897, the Army decided to experiment with bicycles. It's a new technology. So they have a ride, there's a company of bicyclists, Army bicyclists, who ride from Fort Missoula, Montana to Atlanta. No, Houston. No, St. Louis. St. Louis, right. Fort Missoula, Montana to St. Louis, 1897. Took them about a couple months. But there was an experiment, and the experiment worked. Here's another photograph. This is Lieutenant Moss. He was in command of the expedition. And one of the things they did was, one of the bicyclists was actually a real expert on bicycles. Remember, this is relatively new technology. A lot of people don't know about bikes, but one guy did, and he went along as the mechanic. So it's, for example, if a bicycle breaks down, he stays back with that bicycle, gives the other guy his bike, and they move on. He repairs the bicycle and then catches up. Yeah, it's hard to see right now, but they also have their provisions with them. So they have those things. They did. Well, by 1897, we have pretty good surveys and maps of the routes. So all of this was planned well ahead of time. So they knew which routes that were going to be the best routes. They went through Yellowstone Park and visited Yellowstone and things like that. So they knew where to go. So, but in a sense, this is an experiment. So you're going to run into issues when you have an experiment. Lewis and Clark did the same thing. They just dealt with it. And when they came into rough terrain, they moved through it, or they found alternate routes. So it was essentially a scout. It was a scout on bicycles. Okay, more black soldiers. This is I believe this is the 24th Regimental Band marching through Santa Fe. That's Palace of the Governors right there. So again, they're doing the same things that the other soldiers did. And in fact, regimental bands were very, very popular. There's a story, it's actually documented. The 25th Infantry, when they were stationed at Fort Missoula, they had concerts every Thursday night in town at the gazebo. And they were very, very well attended. In fact, one of the prominent citizens of Missoula, Montana died, and his request was to have the 25th Infantry Regimental Band at the head of his funeral procession. Very popular. There's another one. These guys are in San Antonio, marching on horseback with their instruments, marching through San Antonio. Is that awesome or what? I just found that picture yesterday. I had no idea. That's a later photograph. I think that's from about the late 1890s, but still. It's a pretty cool photo. Okay, material culture. Dun, dun, dun. This is why I'm here. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about soldiers' gear, uniforms, and things like that, which is what I really like dealing with. I really dig that stuff. Okay, I talked a little bit about uniforms in the early periods, and yes, these is wearing a Civil War period uniform. Oops, He's wearing a Civil War period uniform. Sac coat, the trousers are Civil War. In fact, these might be hand-me-down trousers, which is very common with soldiers. They often got trousers and clothes that were ill-fitting. Black soldiers, white soldiers, same thing. In many cases, somebody musters out, they might sell you their used uniform, and you go to the company tailor and have them fit it for you. Not very uncommon at all. And that's probably what he did, because whoever had this uniform before may have been a little taller than him. But he's a good-looking soldier, nevertheless. He's obviously very proud of his uniform, and you'll see these in a lot of these portraits. You'll see this pride reflected in these people's faces. And yes, the white soldiers had to do the same thing. He's a white guy. Uniform, he's wearing a shell jacket. This is a uniform of a soldier taken about 1870 or so at I think it says Fort Griffin, I'm not sure. But he's about 1870. He's wearing Civil War uniform too. Everybody had to wear Civil War uniforms. Two guys here. These are also Indian Wars period guys. And the reason I know that is this guy is wearing barrack shoes. These shoes down below here, this is why material culture is so cool. These shoes are called barrack shoes. You take off your boots, you take off your brogans, and you put on some comfortable shoes. These shoes are from the 1870s, late 60s, early 70s. So we know that this is an Indian Wars period photograph. Ain't it fun being a curator? All right, next one. Sgt Harris, Fort Sill, 10th Cavalry, Indian Territory. This is a famous photograph of Sergeant John Harris. It was taken by William Sewell, who was the post photographer at Fort Sill. Famous photograph by him. But you see Sergeant Harris wearing what's typically a Civil War period uniform. You notice the button down here. What he's done is the sack coat hangs just a little bit lower than that, but he had his altered just a little bit for comfort. So he had the company tailor alter his, cut it off, sew it back up, and raise it up a little bit better. Easier on horseback. So that's what he's wearing. So Sergeant Harris is a really good documentary photo. It's a great photo, and it just gets published a lot. That's basically it. Yeah, it's a wonderful picture. It's very well documented. We know who the guy is, and we know where he was. We know when the photograph was taken, and we can see it's a great documentary photograph of what a soldier would look like in 1870 on the Western frontier. Nope. That's just flaw in the picture. Yeah. No, he's not wearing glasses. Almost as handsome as me. Okay. This guy is Elijah Earle. He served at Fort Griffin and mustered out after his tour and stayed in the Albany area. And he apparently was a very well-respected citizen of Albany after he mustered out. Now you see here, and I can show you on my uniform over here, these little doohickeys. These are attachments for the shoulder scales, right there. And shoulder scales are part of a dress uniform. The shell jacket kind of doubles as a everyday uniform and dress uniform, because the Army at the time did not really have a dress uniform. The shell jacket was your dress uniform, but it was also your combat uniform as well, and your garrison uniform. So that's what he's got. That's why he has these attachments on here, and he's a corporal in this photograph, and corporals did actually wear shoulder scales because they're NCOs. So they wore those. That's me. Believe it or not, that's an ambrotype picture that was taken at Fort Concho about 1998. And so it's about 130 years after after a soldier like this would have looked like that at Fort Concho, about 1868 or 69. I couldn't resist the opportunity to have that picture made. So, but again, it's a reversed image. You see the buttons on the wrong side. My pistol is over here instead of over here. Saber, gauntlets. That hat over there is what I'm wearing, the one I just took off. But that's what a cavalry soldier might look like at Fort Concho in the late 1860s.
So you hold your saber with your left hand?
The saber actually is over here.
Yeah.
You draw it with the right hand. It's reversed. The image is reversed. So yeah, that's why.
You're not holding it, it's hanging.
No, it's hanging on there. There's an attachment on the belt that hangs the saber. I'm just holding it because it's just. Yeah, I want to show off my picture to my sweetheart. Yeah. Okay. Dress uniform. Remember I told you shell jackets were combat uniforms? They also serve as dress uniforms. And this is what a cavalry dress uniform would look like, Civil War period, Indian War period, up to the early 1870s. Basically, this is what you're looking at as a dress uniform. Infantry uniform, same thing. This is a Civil War period infantry uniform, but this is also his Civil War period dress uniform, Indian Wars period dress uniform until about 1872. In 1872, they get new stuff. I'll show you that in a minute. Okay, this is a great photograph too. This is Fort Garland, Colorado, late 1860s. These guys here are Buffalo soldiers serving at Fort Garland, Colorado. If you know Colorado, it's west of Walsenburg, back in the hills. But Fort Garland was an interesting and a very important outpost back there, guarding the roads to and from the mines. So it's a really important place. And also we had there was a trail that went up out of New Mexico into Colorado and over clear across to California. And so that road goes right by there, which is why Fort Garland is stationed there. Now, these guys are standing right here, right? Make note of this building right here. That's that foundation right there. So I stood right there. But you can see, you got your flagpole back there, you got your structures back in the background. That's what you're looking at right there. Yeah. Okay, finally we get new uniforms. Some of them are great, some of them are not. But anyway, we have new uniforms coming in about 1872. The Congress decides, okay, you've exhausted your supply of uniforms. Actually, they didn't. They just kind of gave them away. But we're going to give you new uniforms now. So the Army decides to go with this pleated blouse type of thing. I've got one over here that I can show you. Soldiers didn't like that very much. But I can see the practicality of it because the pleats kind of open up and it gives you a lot of room. Actually, mine is fairly comfortable. It gives you a lot of room. But they kind of look unmanly. But the soldiers were wearing these well into the 1870s, even after they received new uniforms. Even after they received more different designs of new uniforms. But anyway, this is one of the first things that come out. And there's one of our soldiers wearing the pleated blouse. So it actually, I think it looks good. What's interesting is reenactors now, Indian Wars reenactors are starting to have these. You didn't see them very much. I was one of the first in Texas to actually have one. Mine's a movie prop, actually, Son of the Morning Star. And but that's something you would find more often now than you would. When I got mine, I think only one other guy had one in Texas, and now there are several of them out there. But anyway, that's that pleated blouse. And he's got a straw hat. In 1871, the Army authorized soldiers in Texas and the Southwest to wear straw hats. Not that they weren't doing it before, but now in 71 we got permission to do it. So you'll see a lot of straw hats on soldiers out on campaigns. Okay, speaking of hats, this is the Andrews hat. Again, 1872. Another monstrosity that the Army comes out with, and I've got one over there. This hat was designed, I'll take them off of here. This hat was actually designed to be worn in different ways. You see how the brim is turned up on the upper photo? It's got these hooks that you can turn up the brim and hook it up like that so you kind of wear it like a chapeau. Or you can wear it with one side up and one side down. Believe it or not, reenactors love wearing this with one side up and one side down. For some reason, to us, it looks cool. To us. But anyway, again, that's something that wasn't very popular. They tended to be fairly floppy, not really good quality. They fell apart. But again, you still see photographs of soldiers wearing those into the 1870s. There's a picture of one with the brim turned up and half down. So anyway, but again, that's what the Army was issuing out in 1872. Here's a photograph of officers taking a break. They're out in the field. A couple of them. This guy is wearing his in chapeau form. This guy's wearing what's called a barracks cap. Oh, no, he's wearing his too. He's got his turned up and he's looking straight at the camera. So it looks kind of goofy that way, but you know. In many cases, the brims are being worn up so that their faces can be seen in the photo. It's a bright sunny day. This is Custer's staff during the 1874 Black Hills Campaign. 1874, they're still wearing these in the field. But they've got the brims turned up so that you can see who they are, because this is a documentary photograph of Custer's staff, so that you want to know who's who. Well, you can't do that if the brim is turned down and their head's in the shade. You can't do that, so they turn the brims up. That's my guess. But anyway, there you go. There's your 1872 hat. Dress uniform. We get brand new dress uniforms too. Right down to the Prussian style dress helmet, brand new tunic and everything in 1872. Now, why do we have helmets like this? Well, the U.S. Army doesn't want to look like losers. Remember in 1871, the French and the Prussians have this little war, and the French come out on the bottom? They get the short end of that war. Uniforms before were based largely on French designs. After the Franco-Prussian War, we don't want to look like these losing French. We want to look like the Prussians. So we redesigned the uniforms to look like Prussians. That's why that's even well into the late 1890s, we still have the spiked helmets. Remember photographs from World War I, the Germans in World War I having the spiked helmet? That's a throwback to that old Franco-Prussian War victory, feeling cocky about yourselves, wearing those Prussian helmets. Well, anyway, that's what the U.S. Army was thinking here. Really great photograph of soldiers, and here, 1, 2, I think all these guys are black soldiers. They're all wearing their 1872 dress helmets. This is a staff of NCOs, obviously senior NCOs, with their 1872 dress uniforms and dress helmets. Nice image, really nice image. Okay, and then enlisted man is a white guy, but again, same uniform. His plumed helmet, his cords here, and Saber. Of course, he's looking proud. He's a good-looking soldier. Okay, officers get new uniforms too. We can't leave the officers out. Sorry, we have to dress the officers too. Officers get a new duty uniform in 1872. This is the 1872 officers' undress uniform. Undress means not dress, not formal. So this is like their everyday duty uniform, like what I'm wearing right now. He's got the embroidered frog design on it here, and it's better fitting. It's not the sack coat, it's not the long frock coat, it's a better fitting thing. It's whole different type of cut, whole different type of construction on these things. So that's what officers get to wear. And this is an officer's dress uniform, very much like the enlisted men's uniform, except he's got his gold embroidered belt. He's got shoulder knots here, and they would indicate his rank. And it's double-breasted, so this guy is probably he's a senior officer. He's a major colonel or lieutenant colonel. So he's a senior officer. And here's a guy. This is officer's uniform. Got the belt. He's got the shoulder knots. Double-breasted. He's got 2 campaign medals here, probably Civil War vintage campaign medals, because he's probably a Civil War veteran. And his helmet with the plume. Again, the way light reflects off of those colors, that plume would actually be yellow. We know that this guy was a cavalry officer because he's got a cavalry saber. If he were an artillery officer, he would have an artillery saber. If he were an infantry officer, he would not have the plumed helmet. He would have a different headgear altogether different. But we know he's a Cav guy. Go Cav. Okay, and here's a good photograph of the cavalry, the early cavalry dress helmet. Now these change a little bit in the 1880s. The back, what's called the lobster back, gets shortened up a little bit. The eagle plate gets changed a little bit. In 1883, the 1881, the uniform changes. The eagle faces the other direction. So at a glance, you can tell, oh, that's a late one, that's an early one, just by the way the eagle is facing. Just a little bit of trivia.
What is the plume? Is it
Horsehair. It's horsehair. Yes, ma'am. Dyed horsehair. Yep. Okay. Duty uniform. Just like what I'm wearing here. This is the duty. This is the everyday, garrison uniform. In fact, in garrison, which just means at the fort, you're going to wear your kepi. You're going to wear your 18. This is 1874. In 1874, we get new uniforms. So this is basically what you're going to look like. You don't have to wear the pleated blouse anymore, although some of them do. You get a new 1874 coat, 5-button coat, and that's what I'm wearing right now. Your trousers are cavalry trousers are lined, reinforced on the inside so they don't wear out when you're riding horseback. And he's wearing shoes and not boots. You have what are called brogans. Brogans are low-cut boots that you wear around fort and everything like that. Not campaign cavalry boots like these, although you can if you want to. Doesn't matter. But generally you don't. They're a lot more comfortable. Okay, here we have another soldier wearing the same thing. He's got the new 1874 blouse. It's got the piping on it, yellow color for cavalry, blue for infantry, red for artillery. Those are your 3 basic colors. He's a cavalryman because you can see his cavalry insignia right here. Okay, this guy, he's a dandy. You'll find a lot of casual photographs. These guys just want to take really cool casual pictures to send off to their sweethearts, you know. Well, that's what this guy's got in mind. He's got his pistol stuck in his belt. You don't really wear it that way, but for a photograph, he's going to do it. Hat turned back. He's just kind of sitting there, and like he's like really I'm cool type of guy. Notice he's also got his white Berlin gloves on. They're called Berlin gloves, white gloves, like white cotton gloves what people in museums wear. Okay, that's what those are. And he's got a nice watch chain. He wants to show that off too. And besides that, he's wearing a vest underneath that. Now, the Army soldiers tended to wear a vest that was made out of the same cloth, this blue broadcloth. They were never issued by the Army, but it seems like every soldier and their uncle had one. And they're very, very popular. I've got one at home. But they like wearing those, so he's naturally going to show that off too. Yeah, he's looking sharp. Okay, this guy, again, he's got his blouse on. He's a sergeant. He's not wearing his hat, but he's very casual. He's got a civilian vest on underneath, which is not uncommon either. Now, you don't see a lot of these portraits. You see these guys with their coats open. That's kind of a no-no when you're on duty. You don't do that. But for a casual portrait, you'll see a lot of these guys wearing them like that because they just want to be casual. They want to open up. They want to show their vest off and things like that. So this is just a non-military casual photo of a soldier. He's got his neck scarf. Okay, these guys are scouts. This is later. This is probably well into the 1880s. This is an 1880s belt. But anyway, this guy may very well be a Seminole scout. And obviously these guys are Indian scouts. It's a nice photograph. I don't remember where this one was taken. I think it might be down near Fort Clark, but I'm not sure. But anyway, scouts' uniforms, very much like soldiers' uniforms. Sometimes the Indian scouts would be wearing combinations of uniform parts and their native clothing parts, and sometimes they're just not wearing in uniform parts at all. So anyway, there you go. Let's talk about horse gear. I have my saddle right here. This is my saddle. This is the most comfortable saddle I've got. I've got 4 saddles. This is my favorite one. This is a McClellan saddle. Now here you can see how the gear is carried on the saddle. On the right side of the saddle on the horse, which would be the far side. Those of y'all who are into horses, you know that. Not Gary Larson's far side, but you know. Sometimes you get into a Gary Larson type of thing. I'll tell you all kinds of stories about that. That's why I walk with a limp. You got your carbine, your rifle here. This is called a nose bag. When I do programs with kids, I pull out a kid out of the audience and I have him put the nose bag on and demonstrate how the nose bag works. And then all the other kids take pictures of him or her, and it's really fun. But anyway, you have your a great coat, which is your big overcoat. Mine is sitting over there. Over here, you have a blanket. You have your what's called your rain poncho wrapped up in that. Sometimes you have saddlebags. Let's flip over. Okay, this is the near side. Canteen cup, saddlebag. You can get a better look at the great coat, blanket, and you're going to also have what's called a feed bag, which is a canvas pouch. It's about that long. That's tied to the saddle too. So when you go to feed your horse, you fill that with you take a cup of grain out of that bag, dump it into the nose bag, strap that on the horse, and that's how you feed your horse in the field. So, again, there you go. Get your rain poncho here with the blanket wrapped up in it, saddlebags. This is called a carbine thimble. Now, prior to the 1870s, the Army, when they changed uniforms, they also changed weapons. I'll talk about weapons in a little bit. But when the Army changed weapons, they had to change the method for carrying them because there's a whole different design. Prior to that, you could carry your carbine into this socket, and you just kind of stick it in there. In fact, mine has one. After a while, you can come up and take a look at it. It's right here. And you slide it down in there, and that keeps it in place. Now, when you're riding, you have what's called a carbine sling. That's like this right here. And the hook hooks into a ring on your carbine. You wear that across your shoulder, and that keeps your carbine. When I'm doing that, what I do, because I'm a safety nut, when I mount up, I unhook my carbine, slip my carbine into the thing, and tie it onto the saddle. I do not attach myself to the carbine because I've been thrown way too many times, and I don't like the thought of being thrown off a horse and being attached to the horse. That would be bad. So I don't do that. But anyway, that's how it's designed. That's what it's supposed to be. More just basically information about what the different saddle parts look like, your bridle also, and head stalls, bits, things like that. I've got all that stuff up here. It's a low port curb. Let's see. We'll show you in a minute. It's right here. It's called a low port curb. That's your bit right there. And remember, horses don't have any teeth back there, so it fits nice and snug right back there. So, y'all horse people, you know that. Okay. Anyway, zipping right along. Okay, Muybridge was right. Who's familiar with Edward Muybridge and Muybridge's experiment with horses? He bet somebody, and I forgot who the bet was with. It might have been with Edison, I'm not sure. But Stanford, Leland Stanford, one of the big four, the railroad guy out of California. Okay, yeah, it was bet with Stanford. That when a horse runs, there's a one period when all of a horse's hoofs are off the ground. The horse is actually suspended in midair for a split second with every step of the gait. And Stanford said, nah, it can't be. So Muybridge set up his famous experiment where he had a whole series of cameras and tripwires, and when the horse ran along, every time the horse pulled one of those wires, the camera went off. So he's got this whole sequence of photographs of horses running. And some of those pictures are just like what I'm doing here, with those all four horses' feet are off the ground. See right there? I'm off the ground there. Flying, for sure. No wings, nothing. Go figure. But, hands. But anyway, Muybridge was right. Horses do get up off the ground when they're running. Okay, that was kind of fun, wasn't it? Okay, cavalry arms. Let's talk about weapons. I didn't get to bring my guns because Tech said no. Well, actually, they didn't say no. They just never replied to us. I took that as a no. But anyway, they didn't say I can't bring photos, and they didn't say that I can't bring sabers and knives. So I got my saber, my swords, my knives. I got that stuff over there. Just don't tell them. But anyway, okay, cavalry arms. Let's talk about that. We have sidearms in the cavalry. This is a model 1860 Army Colt revolver, 44 caliber. This is one of mine. All the guns, pictures of guns you're going to see are my guns. So instead of bringing the real thing, I'll just show you pictures. But it's 44 caliber. This is just some data on the gun that us gun nuts care about. Other people wouldn't care about at all. But the fact is that this one is a Civil War era firearm. Again, remember I was telling you they're using Civil War equipment until 1870s? Well, they're still using their 1860 Army Colt revolver. Looks just like that. And your 1863 Remington New Army revolver. A lot of people call that the 1858, which is a misnomer. This is the 1863 Remington New Army revolver. The 1858 refers to the Beals patent, and I won't get into all of that, but there you go. We know that the 9th Cavalry out here in Texas were carrying these. How do we know that? because we have something called ordnance returns, primary documentation that tells us what each company was carrying when. They would produce these documents every quarter. So every quarter of every year, they would do an inventory of what guns, what weapons are in stock for that particular company, and they would be able to know what kind of weapons they have. So by and large, we know that the 9th Cavalry out here were carrying the 1863 Remington revolver. 10th Cavalry were carrying the 1860 Army Colt. Why? I don't know. Just because that's what they were carrying. Who knows? Never got into that, why they had one or the other. Personally, I prefer the Remington. That's my favorite. I have 3 of those. I like those a lot. Okay. Sharps carbines. Again, 1863 Sharps. This is the 1863 model. Prior to the 1870s, the Army was carrying these guys. Some of them were carrying these guys. 10th Cavalry, by and large, were carrying these guys. Okay? It carries a 50 caliber, it shoots a 50 caliber cartridge. It was converted from 52 caliber to 50 caliber. And it's a single shot. Okay, Spencer. This is my trusty Spencer. I love this gun. Mine is a 50 caliber. Pay no attention to what it says 5650. It's really complicated to try to explain what that means, but trust me, it's a 50 caliber. 1865 model. Again, Civil War vintage. This is a variation on the 1862 model. But again, the 9th Cavalry were carrying these. How do we know that? Ordnance returns tell us so. Okay, we got good documentation on what these guys had in the field. Okay, now along with the Spencer, this is a Spencer right here, you have what's called a Blakeslee Box. Now the way this thing works, there's a magazine, tubular magazine that comes in here. It opens, you pull it out right here through that little porthole, and it holds 7 cartridges. And you fill that thing with cartridges, you shove that tube up in there, and that gives you 7 shots. When you cock that, lever, what it does is it chambers one of them. So it puts it in the chamber, and the chamber is going to be right about there. When you fire it and cock it again, it kicks out the old used cartridge case and loads another one. That's what's called a repeater. All right? Now, what this Blakeslee box does is it gives you a whole bunch of tubes of cartridges ready to go. So, kind of like speed loader. Not too dissimilar from that. And here's our carbine sling with our hook that I don't connect when I'm on horseback. Okay, 1873, the Army authorizes new weapons. So we have the Colt Single Action Army Revolver right here. It's a cartridge gun, not a cap and ball revolver, so everything is self-contained in one little unit that looks like this. This is a dummy cartridge. It's not real. There's nothing in it. So we call it a dummy. It doesn't mean it's stupid. It means it doesn't do anything. Okay, that's what we have. All right, now, that's what all of the soldiers are going with now. Instead of having some soldiers carrying Remington, some soldiers carrying Colts, they're going primarily with the Colt, except those who want to carry the Smith & Wesson. Smith & Wesson Scofield Army Revolver, 1874. Smith & Wesson comes out with this. Some soldiers like to carry that. It's really important. Scofield, it's called the Scofield because Colonel Scofield actually designed this. Now, a little bit about the 19th century Army. When you're an Army officer and you invent something, you get your name attached to it. McClellan saddle, Sibley stove, Mills cartridge belt, Dyer pouch, all of these things. That's your name gets attached to that. You can't do that anymore, but that's what happened back then. So Scofield invented this. And remember, a lot of these officers are West Point graduates. So what does that mean? They're engineers. They're mathematical wizards. They know how to design, they know how to build, they understand mechanics, they understand physics, all of these things. So that was the Army's, that was the curriculum at West Point. It still is. So anyway, he designs this thing, and what makes it interesting is on horseback you can use this instead of having to manually use both hands to open this up. It's a top, what's called top brake. Open that up, kick out all those cartridges and put new ones in. He invents a little lever here where you can just bang it against your leg, pop it open, the empty cartridges spill out, and then you put new ones in. So that's Scofield. He was really sharp. Okay? Now, Next one. We have the 1873 Springfield trapdoor carbine. This is brand new. This is state-of-the-art weapon in the 1870s. They start experimenting with this in the 1860s. They start converting Civil War muskets into these trapdoor weapons. So by 1873, this is the pinnacle of that technology. This is the apex of what's going on there. 45-70 government, which means it's a 45 caliber cartridge. Looks like this. Again, it's a dummy. Don't be afraid. It won't hurt you. Okay, question?
Yes, sir. Why did they go from a 7-shot rifle in the 1860s to a single-shot rifle in the 1870s?
That's one of my favorite questions. 2 reasons. First of all, the 7-shot Spencer fires a cartridge that looks like this. Okay. Single-shot Springfield fires a cartridge that looks like this. Which one has more powder in it? Which one's more powerful? This one does. You got a lot more accuracy, a lot more impact power on it, and also it's technologically it's just way better. The Spencer is a little more complicated. It can have more problems in the field. The simpler design, the better. All right. And also, Springfield was a government arsenal, so they didn't have to pay royalties. Somebody was thinking. It's over in the War Department there. Somebody was thinking. But anyway, yeah, 1873 carbine. Now, what's interesting about this, we go back to the idea that the myth, which is total garbage, that the black soldiers receive inferior equipment, inferior this and inferior that. Not true. When these things come out, 10th Cavalry were there in Kansas. They get theirs early on. By March of 1874, the entire 10th Cavalry is outfitted with trapdoor Springfields. Now, remember that guy Custer? Ever heard of him? He's been in all the papers. The reason why Custer's 1874 expedition left Fort Abraham Lincoln when it did, because he was waiting for these guys. He still had Spencers and Sharps single shots. He couldn't leave until he got these guys. So he didn't leave until July. I forgot when actually the expedition left. He had to hold up his whole program, his whole thing, until he got these. Who did I say got him first? 10th Cavalry. There you go. And it may also have something to do with it that Major Scofield was actually attached to the 10th Cavalry at the time. So it's all about who you know. But anyway, these guys in Kansas, they're still fighting Cheyennes. The guys in Texas are still fighting Comanches in the early 1870s. These weapons go to where they're needed. Okay? So, and the way the Army logistical system works, transportation and all like that, you have to send them to where they need to go. Now, it wasn't a big deal for these weapons to go out of Fort Leavenworth to the Kansas frontier. It wasn't a big deal for these weapons to go out of San Antonio, which was the military center of the Southwest. It still is, and it has been since 1718. It wasn't a big deal to send these weapons from San Antonio out to Fort Davis, Fort McCavitt, Fort Concho, Fort Griffin, Fort whatever, out there. A little bit further from Fort Leavenworth to Fort Abraham Lincoln. So that's what's going on. Logistics, logistics, logistics. The Army is all about logistics. Oh yeah. Yes, sir.
What's the substance to the rumor that Adobe Walls had 4570s? The Springfield. Anything?
Probably not that early. Probably not that early. The cache of cartridges that we find at Adobe Walls weren't 4570s. So where it comes from, who knows? I don't know. But I'm pretty sure that early on that you're not going to find 4570s in June of 1874 on a Buffalo Hunter's outpost. Good question. Sharps, trapdoor Springfields, Remington rolling blocks, everything. Yeah, there's the whole variety. That's another lecture. Bring me back and let me talk about Buffalo Hunters. Because I would love to. That's another 2-hour lecture. But yeah, they're using a lot of different things. But you might find some, but not going to find them in abundance, really. So there you go. Quite possible. because the 4570 cartridges comes out about 1873. Some of them might be going to the civilian market, but you're not going to find a lot of them. So anyway, that comes a little bit later. By about 75, they're using them. Okay, now pistol cartridges. This is a we're going to shift a little bit to talk about leather. This is what we call a fair weather Christian belt. I don't know why that was called that. Two guys named Fairweather and Christian, I don't know. The jury is still out on that, by the way. A lot of my friends and colleagues who do this for a living, who study nothing but belts, Steve Dorsey's one of them. He's a belt nerd. But he has one theory. Ken McFeeters, who lives right outside of Austin, he's a big collector. He has a theory. Everybody's got a theory. I don't have a theory. I just call them fair weather Christian belts and let them stay at that. But anyway, okay, we're good. Checking the time. That's what's called a fair weather Christian belt. What's going on here is during the Civil War, you had a pouch that you had to carry your cartridges in. It gets cumbersome. During the Indian Wars, you still have the Army producing these pouches. This one right here. It's called a dyer pouch. You got your loose cartridges in there. But that's on the back of your belt. And it's kind of cumbersome to reach back there. I've tried it, and it just doesn't work. So somebody decided, hey, saddler, make me a belt with loops on it so that I could carry my cartridges on my belt. So he comes up with this. Very, very common early on in the late 1860s. A lot of people are using these things. I've got one up there. There's another one. Again, canvas loops. This is all about evolution. We evolved from the leather belt with the leather loops to a leather belt with canvas loops, and I've got one right there. Okay, here's another one, leather belt, leather loops. To what's called this is the 1876 model canvas cartridge belt. Remember our friend Mills? He comes up with this and gets to put his name on it. Okay, Captain Mills. So that becomes the Mills cartridge belt, and actually that design and its variations became the standard through World War II. In World War II, we're still using canvas cartridge belts, canvas webbing, canvas pouches, canvas this and that. That starts in the 1870s with the Army. Canvas better than leather. Okay? All right. There's another one. This is the later model. This is the 1881. Oh, here it is. It's the 1881 cartridge belt. Looks like that. Okay. Okie dokie, where are we at here? And again, your 1873 cartridge, carbine, pistol. Now, what happened to the Saber? Where do the Sabers go? We're not carrying Sabers anymore. Why is that? During the Civil War period, cavalry soldiers had these things that they're carrying around. Who are they fighting with these? Confederates who are also trained to fight with these. So you're going to be fairly evenly matched, and it's a whole different kind of warfare. Now, when you go out on the frontier in Kansas in 1867 and 68, or in Texas in 1867 and 68, who are you going to fight with that? Indians aren't going to even let you get anywhere close enough to fight with that. Besides, it's heavy. It makes a lot of noise. You don't want that. So let's get smart and start carrying butcher knives. Something we learned from the fur trappers. This is a whole lot more practical than that. What can you do with this besides hand-to-hand combat? You can dig holes with it. You can cook with it. You can cut meat with it. You can cut ropes with it. It's a utility tool in camp, and it's a weapon in battle. So you got lots of guys. Everybody's carrying those things. There's another one. So you're carrying those now. Nobody's carrying those cumbersome sabers anymore. The sabers are used for ceremonial purposes only. So I meant to say that. They're only used for ceremonial purposes or guard duty, because guard duty is a dress occasion. Because when you're in guard duty, basically you're the greeter at the fort. You're at Walmart, okay? You're the greeter at the fort. So visitors who come in, important people, generals who come in, you want to look your best. When you're on guard duty, you're in your clean uniform. You're wearing your guard sash. You're wearing your saber. In many cases, you're wearing your white Berlin gloves. So, yes, sir. A little bit of both. The Army did issue a particular type of butcher knife. It's got a double-edged blade on it. But for the most part, soldiers just go down to the sutlers and buy one, or take it off a dead Indian. You know, either way. So, okay, in the field. In the field. This is a famous Remington. I like Remington's work because all of his works are based on eyewitness. He was out there with the Buffalo Soldiers in Arizona in the 1880s. So a lot of his field sketches evolve into his paintings. So he would have seen a scene like this. Here you got a soldier. He's got a civilian holster on. He didn't like his Army holster, but he's got his knife. He's got his knife there. This guy's got it's probably got a knife on the other side, but they're all wearing canvas cartridge belts, but they still got their carbines, slings and hooks, and of course the horses back there and everything. This is a painting called Cavalryman's Breakfast on the Plains. Okay, more stuff. Basically, what does a cavalryman carry in the field? Now, they're not going to carry 5 rifles. They're going to carry one of them, but they're going to carry one of these. But anyway, saddle, lanyard, and picket pin. This is for picketing your horse when you're out here in West Texas near Lubbock and ain't no trees. You want to picket your horse with that. You got a picket pin that drives into the ground. You tie that to the horse, and he can go, he can go wander and graze, and he won't go anywhere. What else do you have? Reading material. They like to read. Picture of your sweetheart or your mom. Musical instruments. Jew's harp. I have a Jew's harp. I play the Jew's harp. I didn't bring it with me because y'all don't want to hear that. But anyway, Buffalo Hunter lecture. I'll play the Jew's harp. Okay. All right. And of course your weapons and gear. All right. Now, this is what you're carrying on your horse. Now, what are you going to carry the rest of your stuff? You got feed, you got your saddler and your farrier who's got his forge and his anvil and all that stuff. Where does that go? Did someone say wagons? Yes. An Army column on the move had what's called escort wagons. Pulled by 4 mules, they would carry all of the tendage, the gear, feed, water, things like that. So when you see these John Ford Westerns with a whole column of cavalry and they're all just horses and they're, nah, not going to happen. Anyway, when you get an assignment to go out in the field, it may be a patrol, you may be going out to relieve somebody else who's guarding a water hole, you may go out to try to recapture some horses, you might be called into your commanding officer's office or your adjutant and say, this is what we're going to do. And we're probably going over a roster, and this sergeant, smart guy, he's telling this officer, these are the guys I want on this patrol, but please don't give me this guy, because this guy is a slacker. I don't want him. He's going to stay back and clean stables, because I don't want him in the field. But these are the guys I want. So they'll go through the logistics of what's going on, where I'm going to go. He's basically receiving his assignment. Commanding officer is getting his opinion on what he thinks he needs to do. Then he's going to sit down and plan out the routes. He's going to plan the patrol. He's got his compass there. He's got his map. He's got his books. He's got everything he needs to sit there and plan where he's going to go. And by and large, these patrols are led by sergeants. Sergeants, NCOs are the backbone of the Army. I know that everybody says that, and it's true. Who's been in the Army before? Okay. Yeah, everybody knows that. Officers, who needs them? But anyway, so he's gonna plan out this whole campaign. He's going to calculate how long it's going to take. He's going to talk to his quartermaster sergeant. He's not going to necessarily talk to the quartermaster, because he's going to talk to the quartermaster sergeant, the real power behind the supply. Okay? He's going to talk to quartermaster sergeant, and they're going to work out how much supply, how much feed, how much of this, that, and the other he's going to need. and the quartermaster sergeant will be in charge of packing those wagons. All right? Okay. Or pack mules. This is a really cool Remington drawing of, and it's not a great one, but it's illustrative enough to show pack mules being used. The Army used a lot of pack mules, especially in the Southwest when the terrain is really, really super rugged. Or up in the northern plains, like Custer, his 76 campaign, he didn't bring in wagons. He used pack mules. He liked pack mules because it makes more sense. That kind of terrain up there, he knew that he was going into really rough terrain. Remember, Custer was a West Point graduate too, so he understood how to read terrain. He understood how to read geography. So he knew what kind of packing, what kind of logistics he was going to need. Same thing here. They use a lot of pack mules, okay? Now, there's our guy. That's Molly. Molly was a great horse. But there's our guy. He's ready to go. This is what a cavalry soldier in late 1860s on campaign might look like. He's ready to get mounted up. Now, was it just the cavalry out there? Infantry. What's the infantry's job? Infantry's job is to guard the wagon train, and that's exactly what they're doing. By and large, most of your columns are going to be made up of foot soldiers. In spite of what you might see by those stupid John Ford movies, most of your column is going to be made up of foot soldiers. The infantry is going to be out there doing the grunt work. Okay? The wagons might have some mounted escort, but by and large, it's going to be your infantry out there. And that's what they're doing. They're guarding that wagon train. Wagon train's going to be further behind because the wagons are a little bit slower. Cavalry column's going to be further ahead. But the wagon train is going to be catching up. Okay? Catch up later. Okay. Yeah.
So in Custer's campaign to Little Bighorn, he didn't have infantry with him, did he, because of the terrain problem?
He did have infantry with him.
He did.
Yeah, there was infantry. Well, there was supposed to be infantry in Crook's column, but Crook got turned back at Rosebud, and so, but Crook's column had the infantry support. That was one of the logistical problems of that whole fiasco. His force, actually it was General Terry who was in charge of it. Terry's force was cut by 1/3. So, yeah, but the Crook's column was infantry out of Fort Fetterman. Okay. Remember Cavalryman's Breakfast on the Plains? Sort of based on this drawing by Remington. Again, he was out there with the soldiers. He had a great time with these Buffalo soldiers. He just had a grand time. They just loved him. They were crazy about him. But these guys are sitting there having their little breakfast, and sketches like this are what we have that tell us what the Army's looking like out in the field during this time period. Okay, communicating with your scouts. This soldier is communicating through sign language with his Indian scouts. So sign language is very important. Particularly, a lot of your NCOs, especially those who went out on campaign a lot, could also do sign language. They could probably speak Apache. They could probably speak Lakota. They could probably speak Comanche. So they were really, really good at this. If they're in Texas, they probably spoke Spanish too, because Comanche spoke Spanish also. So they're really good at communicating back and forth, and that's what's going on here. He's saying, he's probably telling him, you want pizza tonight? No, let's go for burgers. But anyway, no, they're sort of figuring out, mapping out, getting advice. He's getting advice from the Indian scout, and so from that, he's going to go back and report back to, if there's an officer there, he's going to report back to his senior NCO, or he may just be in command of the column. So he's not going to report to anybody. But the decision will be made based on the intelligence that's becoming available. Okay, now we just dismounted and we're kind of engaged right here with the enemy. Now, what's he doing with the horses? All right, this is where I get to talk about one of the aspects of my horse gear. That soldier is leading 4 horses. He's riding 1 and leading 3. Get over there. Every horse halter has what's called a, I forgot the name of this thing. Anyway, it's a hook that hooks onto the halter of the horse next to him. They were in a column of fours. Column of fours means you got four soldiers abreast, okay? Now, in order to protect the horses, every 4th trooper has to lead the horses away. In fact, this painting is called the 4th troopers leading the horses or something like that. Another Remington. But anyway, that's what he's doing. He's got every horse has one of these hooks on him, okay? It's called a link strap. I'm sorry, my head went blank. It's called a link strap. And what he's going to do is take this hook and connect it to this ring on the halter, and then the next horse is going to do the same thing and the same thing, so that he can actually lead every horse that he's got charge of away from the fight. He's basically, you can tell, he's kind of leading them to the rear, okay? Now, that doesn't mean that soldier is out of the battle, because his job is to protect those horses. You never know if those Indians are going to sneak around to the rear and try to take those horses away, which is what they're after anyway. So he's got to be somebody who actually knows, first of all, he's got to be a good soldier, good fight, knows how to fight. He's got to be really good with horses, and he's got to be really good with horses under fire, because these horses are scared-less. So they don't know what's going to happen, okay? So what he's got to do is lead them back and keep them settled down and protect them at the same time. So your best soldiers who are good with horses are going to get that job right there. So they're not out of the battle. They got the worst part of it, because he's got to take care of 4 horses under fire. So it's not going to be real super easy for him. Ain't no picnic in the rear. Okay. Again, okay, we got our soldiers are out on the charge. I like this painting. I forgot who did this one. I forgot. I couldn't read it. But anyway, this is a good one, because we've got our officer here. Officers got an escort here, and this guy's carrying. Well, he's not carrying a guy on. You know, he's got his weapon. Okay, but anyway, I like this picture because it's an officer with probably three of his trusted soldiers. They're riding off to do something else while all the action's going on over there. So anyway, they may be on a flank scout, who knows. So anyway, again, fight's going on. Where's our infantry guys? They're guarding the wagon train, okay? So, because the Indians are going to want to take those, they want to burn them, they want to capture them and get the supplies out and that kind of thing. They're going to say, no, you're not either. We have a civilian here. What's this guy doing? He's a civilian scout. Yep. So we got civilian scouts in the column too. And again, like I said, we also have farriers. We have saddlers, sometimes on campaign. We have engineers going on campaign. When Custer went to the Black Hills in 1874, he had topographical engineers with him. He had scientists with him. He had photographers with him. A lot of these campaigns, a lot of these big columns are going to be major operations. So everybody's going to go out on these things. Because not only are they going to explore, they're going to probably end up fighting, but the main job is they're going to go out and try to complete all these surveys that are going on. The Army surveys in Texas get started right after the Mexican War, about 1850 or so. They don't really finish the surveys until the very late 1870s. This area where we're sitting on right now wasn't really surveyed completely until about 1877. So there's always something that the Army always has something to do. Yeah, Comanche's kind of gotten away. But it takes a long time to survey. I mean, even if y'all have been on an archaeological survey, you know it takes a while. Well, the Army engineers, same thing. It takes a while to go out and map and document and do all of these things. And one of the things they had to teach in West Point was they taught sketching. Every West Point graduate came out knowing how to draw, because he had to use sketches to try to help document what's going on out there. But anyway, back to wagons. Infantry, their job is to guard the wagons. Okay, true story. This is a drawing by Remington called The Rescue of Corporal Scott. Corporal Scott, this was a fight that the 9th Cavalry had with the Utes somewhere in Colorado. I forgot exactly where. But they were in a fight, and they got pinned down by gunfire, and Corporal Scott right here gets hit. He's bleeding right here. He gets shot in the leg. Captain Collins is right here. He was Scott's company commander. He drags him to safety along with the help of this other soldier. Notice the butcher knife on this guy's belt. They got those, but he's still got his carbine is attached to his sling there. But anyway, Corporal Scott gets rescued. He gets dragged back under cover, and then the fight goes on, and they eventually drive the Indians off. But true story about Corporal Scott. This is Corporal Scott. He gets mustered out at Fort Huachuca in 1887, and but you can see he's got his leg amputated. He was shot in the leg, and by the time they got back to post, infection had set in, so he lost his leg. But he was decorated. Captain Collins gets the Medal of Honor for the rescue, and this all goes down in the annals of frontier military history. So, true story, really interesting story too. Okay, where are we at next? Oh, legacies. Who recognizes that? Huh? No. That's the, Alan, you know who that is. No, Buffalo, but no. Close, you got it half right. This is Eddie Dixon's Buffalo Soldier Monument at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Our own Eddie Dixon, right? I don't know where Eddie is. I'm going to give him all kinds of crap for not being here. But anyway, Eddie did that, and I think that guy's wearing my boots, come to think of it. But anyway, yeah, this is the famous Buffalo Soldier Monument at Fort Leavenworth. The dedication of this monument was a big deal. Colin Powell was there, and everybody was there, and it was a big major deal. If you go to Fort Leavenworth, you have to go down to find that. It's down in the lower part of the fort, down in the lowlands, which is where the 10th Cavalry were garrisoned, down kind of in the swampy area. And in fact, where this statue is right now, there's running water. There's a spring and a creek that runs right by it, and it's been a spring ever since the beginning of time, and it's still a spring that runs through there. But anyway, this is the legacy of the Buffalo Soldier, and now everybody knows what Buffalo Soldiers are, and so there you go. I think I'm done. Oh, live for horses. That was a rescue horse. His name is Freedom, and I got to work with Freedom down in Andrews. Did a program for them in one of their Wild West days. I'd never met Freedom before that time. By the next day, I was riding Freedom all over the place. Freedom hadn't been ridden for like 3 years, but we kind of bonded, and we became buds. Oh, thanks, appreciate it. So anyway. I've got a few things up here if people got questions or you want to look at stuff real close. I brought books. I always bring books when I do these programs because everybody loves books. We're in a library. Am I going to bring books? Of course I am. But we always like to talk about resources. Where the heck do you find all this stuff? Well, I've got a lot of good variety of different things, and I didn't bring everything. But there are a lot of good resources out there. Post histories, fort histories, Allen's book on Fort Phantom Hill. It's still out there. Of course, Paul Carlson's book on the Buffalo Soldier Tragedy of 1877, and Paul Carlson's book on Pecos Bill. This is Bill Shafter. He was commander of the 24th Infantry for many, many, many years. Let's see. This is another one that I like pointing out. Oh, here we go. Charles Kinner. Who remembers Charles Kinner? You remember Kinner. Kinner was on faculty here at Tech. He published 2 books. One was this one, the other one is not. Actually, no, his other book was on the Comanchero trade, which was his doctoral dissertation. But then he comes out with this one a few years ago. I got to review this one in something. I forgot what it was, but anyway, I reviewed that one. But there's Kinner. But this is his other book, Buffalo Soldiers and Officers of the 9th Cavalry. It's a really good book about the relationship between soldiers and their officers, and by and large, it's a good relationship. So really good stuff. Let's see, kids' books. We even have kids' books, by golly. Buffalo Soldiers, Emmanuel Stantz. Emmanuel Stantz was quite a guy. He's one of those legendary soldiers. I won't just say Buffalo Soldiers. He was a legendary soldier. He used to like to get in trouble a lot, but he was a darn good soldier. He received Medal of Honor. In fact, he might have been the last one to receive a Medal of Honor in Texas. He was out on a patrol from Fort McCavitt, went out to recover some horses, got the horses back, was attacked by Indians, wheeled around, attacked those Indians, and then found some Indians that had some captives. He rescued the captives, killed the Indians, and made it back to the fort. So, Medal of Honor recipient for him. I did a program at Fort McCavitt several years ago, and I would talk to people. I would be standing outside the barracks ruins. I would talk to people about him, about Stance, and tell them about the story and everything. Then I would walk him into the ruins, into the sergeant's room, and say, "This is where Stance lived." And you could, the oohs and ahs among the people there. "Oh, this is where he actually lived. Yeah, he slept right here. Manuel Stance slept here." So that was pretty cool. It was fun to do that one. But anyway, primary source material. These books are really important to almost every soldier. It's called Customs of Service. It's basically a collection of job descriptions. If you want to be a quartermaster sergeant is 5 pages in this book about being a quartermaster sergeant. And there's one for officers too. Now, NCOs would probably be reading this book as well because they need to know what their officers are doing. Because especially in the field on a campaign, they're acting officer. That's why they're called NCOs, non-commissioned officers. They're the same as officers, except they don't have commissions. 1874, a lot of things happened in 1874. U.S. Army changes their cavalry tactics because fighting on the frontier against Indians is a whole lot different than fighting in the South against Confederates. So they had to change their tactics. Now this is the updated Army Cavalry Tactics Manual. You want to learn how to play baseball? You can play baseball. Baseball was the national sport, and I think it still is. There, you're welcome. Logistics and supply, peddlers and post traders. This is a really good book on how the sutler system actually operated, actually worked. Let's see, forts and supplies. Here's another one. Bob Frazier did this one. He also did a really good book on frontier forts. I met this lady a couple of years ago, Jennifer Lawrence, did a really good book on Army laundresses. So it's a really excellent book on Army laundresses. She did some really outstanding research. I mentioned belts before. Steve Dorsey and his belt fetish. He's really into belts. He's like the expert on belts. Books about Fort McCavitt. Standing in the Gap is an interesting book because it talks about the outposts. You have your primary posts, Fort Concho, Fort McCavitt, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Then you have these outposts that are kind of satellite posts that the Army use as supply bases and such. And there's one really cool place that's in Sterling County. It's right up the road from Fort Concho called Camp Elizabeth. Some of y'all familiar with Camp Elizabeth. Camp Elizabeth was an outpost. They had a garrison of 16th Infantry there. And their job was to guard the supplies there situated at Camp Elizabeth. So when the Army is out on patrol, they need to be resupplied. They go to these outposts and get resupplied. So, maps. I like maps. These are facsimiles of original maps, and I like using this one a lot. That one picture of me at the table planning my expedition, that's that map right there. You notice the date on this one says 1857. It's an old map, but what's going on, remember that Civil War that interrupted everything? The Army was out doing surveys throughout the 1850s, and then the Civil War comes along and they all get dragged back east. No surveys going on during the war until the 1870s again. So, early Indian War period, right after the war, the Army is still using the old 1850s maps. Until the surveys could get picked up again, and we have, let's see, what's this one? I think this is the 1875. Yeah, 1875 map, Kansas, frontier, Texas, and New Mexico. This one was an 1872 map of Texas. So the surveys start to get picked up again. They start getting back to doing the explorations and such. Uniforms. Did everybody see this? Isn't that cool? Okay, uniforms. I talked a little bit about the shell jacket. This is my other shell jacket. I've got 3 of these. But we looked at these things here a little bit, and you can look closely at that. I was talking about this when I was talking about that one soldier with the attachments on his thing. Again, Civil War period, up until about 1872 or so, this is what you're seeing people wear. And then in 72, they get this wonderful. I look good in it. I don't know. I think I look really good in that. But anyway, movie prop. Hats. This is my campaign hat. Now, show you something. This is that dress hat that I showed you in the photo. This is the same hat, same style. Now, what's going on is a lot of times soldiers would take these old hats on the frontier in the 1860s, 70s, whatever, and 70s, and wear them as campaign hats, and they tend to start looking like this. I've had this hat for over 30 years, 35 years or so. So that's 35 years worth of honest dirt, sweat, and salt stains and all kinds of stuff like that. So that's one of my favorite hats. I love that hat. And then I already showed you that. But anyway, that's about it. If you've got more questions and things like that, we can talk some more. It's going to take me a while to pack all this stuff up, so I'm yours. If you got anything else to say, otherwise, thanks for coming out.